Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Christian Buckley, who will be talking to you about extending collaboration with SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC18. Don't forget to check out the Community Resource Center. This is packed with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com/resource-center. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Christian in the question window. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and will be added to the Resource Center, where you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Christian Buckley. Hello, Christian.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and let me share my screen here, and hopefully you can see all that all right.
Yeah, perfect. Take it away.
Right. Well, I'll just kick in. It looks like I've got a little automation, unintended automation here moving the slides, but thanks for joining today, and for some reason, let's see if it just keeps doing this, but my name is Christian Buckley, so I am a now 7-time MVP around the SharePoint or collaboration space, as I always like to say. It's because I've always been involved with much more than just SharePoint, social technology for a long time, as well as various workloads within the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm a Microsoft Regional Director as well, which a lot of people don't know what regional directors do, but similar to an MVP, it's a title, a role given to people within the community. There are a lot fewer. There's less than a couple hundred of us worldwide, but we are folks that Microsoft has invited to participate and provide guidance to the product and the leadership teams at Microsoft. And so it's a great honor to be an RD and an MVP, and very excited to get to continue to interact with the global community around these topics that I'm so passionate about. So in this session today, go back to the title here. So extending collaboration with SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. This is a great topic for those who might be new to Teams and trying to understand. It's really that where this came out of was the question that a lot of organizations are going through around, the which tool do I use when? And for the last year and a half or so, I've been telling people, that's the wrong question to ask. It's not an either or, and Microsoft has tried to shift a lot of their language in the same way, saying, look, it's the right tool for the right job. Microsoft's work is cut out for them, however. They need to ensure that everything is working together in a way that is slowly going to make, is a way that I describe it, the front end, the tools that you use on the front end, less relevant as far as where is my data, how am I, where is this conversation? If I do a search, am I going to find the components that are relevant to this project, to my team, all those kinds of things, because of the power of the Microsoft Graph that is kind of the underlying all of this. So I'll get in and talk a little bit about each of those things. But I'm gonna start out with kind of I wouldn't say history so much as to give you a background in each of these different pieces. Talk about SharePoint, talk about Teams, and what most of you are interested in is how these things come together, how they work together. So here is one of my favorite graphics of all time, and I did not create it. There's a link that you can't really see here, but I'll share out the slides. These will be out on slideshare.net. If you just search for my name or on my profile of my Twitter handle of Buckley Planet, you should be able to find it. But this was created on a blog called Creating Passionate Users. It's an old blog. It's still out there. You can get to it. I highly recommend, if you are involved with end users and user experience and training, anything like that, It is just a fantastic resource and a lot of funny, simple graphics, but this is one of my all-time favorites. It's been a favorite for about 15 years. But the concept of this, and I always refer to it, and I've blogged about it, called crossing the suck threshold. And so here's the question. You're releasing a new system, a platform, a tool, whatever it is. You release it day one. No matter how much time you put into launching that, what is the first response from your end users to whatever's new? Well, this sucks. Okay. It may. You tried your best to match everything that they wanted across this diverse team, but the reality is that the longer you take to deliver what your end users need to be functional, to be then beyond functional, passionate about it, the longer you take, the less likely you are to win them over. And so if you're able to deliver very quickly, give them what they need, they stay excited, they get moved past the shortcomings of that initial launch, but they're okay, they see the progress. If you take too long, if your IT team is overloaded and not delivering on feature requests and it drags, that's when it doesn't matter how good it eventually becomes, you've lost them. I always use the example of the Zune versus the Apple iPod. Now, if you were like, so I own multiple Zunes. I still use my Zunes, which I know I'm a rare beast out there, but for those of us that are music collectors and music aficionados, the experience of the hardware and the software on the Zune was far superior to the iPod, but it's because, the first version was chunky, it was big, it was rough around the edges, but it became very sleek and beautiful, and the software was fantastic, but they were just too late, and they took too long to get there, and so it never caught on. And so it's kind of a running joke, and I love in the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 how at the end of it, Peter is given because his cassette is broken. He's handed a Zune and told, yeah, this is what people are using to listen to music back on Earth. It's pretty funny. But anyway, so you want to deliver quickly so that people cross that passion threshold. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the delivery of SharePoint and where SharePoint is. And these should be familiar to some of you. Microsoft slides where they're sharing some of the progress, what's happening with SharePoint. And we've heard over the last 3 years, SharePoint is cool again, all these great new features. And it is fantastic to see that Microsoft is going and continuing to invest in this platform. But one of the changes that's happening is that Microsoft is recognized and is moving away from the messaging of SharePoint as a Swiss Army knife. They're no longer calling it that, no longer referring to that. And I remember at European SharePoint conference 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Benjamin Nyland and I in our keynote, we talked about the fact that somebody would say, hey, we need to build a website. What do we use? SharePoint. Hey, we need to build a CRM. What do we use? SharePoint. Hey, we need to go and create a ticketing system. What do we use? SharePoint. And people would go and kind of build whatever they want, because that's the way that we thought of SharePoint. But now Microsoft is redirecting focus around to the core strength of document collaboration, of intranets, of that side of things, and that there are other tools in the mix, other solutions within Office 365, within the broader Microsoft 365 that are better for those other solutions. But again, they need to work together on the back end, and I'll come back to that. But some of the momentum, and I know we're going to get updated numbers around all of this. I think there's even updated numbers out of the SharePoint conference North America that in May. Jeff Teeper was keynoting, and he'll keynote again at the European SharePoint conference in Copenhagen. But you have hundreds of thousands of organizations, 85% of the Fortune 500 here in the US. And increasingly, especially everyone new is going straight to online. There's just this huge shift in how people are looking at their on-premises, hybrid, and cloud options. And there's just a tremendous, and on top of that, I think there's also probably the biggest difference here in the numbers is that these aren't just licenses that are sold through enterprise agreements, and yet the vast majority of them sit unused. The usage of those licenses is also dramatically increasing, which is great to see, because you want that. Anybody who has a product, any company, wants people actually using that software, because if they're not using it, they don't renew at the end of the contract. So you want to make sure that it's critical, that that's giving, providing value, and you want that as an IT shop. You want that for your organization. If your end users are not using the platforms you're providing, that's a problem. So a lot of the components that are out there, of course, you now have the team sites. You've got modern versus classic. You've got the communication sites. You have the various custom sites that you could still go and build. And then you have these site designs and themes, the variations, the more control that you can provide over those. And you have this thing called hub sites, which allows you to then go and combine your team sites and your communication sites and your custom sites and roll it up and have a common theme and design across them. And it's out of the box. It's so easy to go and build those. And also plug in your business applications and intelligent rollups and other tools, things like there's just a ton of great content out there. And I know if you've been looking at the program, whether you're planning to attend Ignite in September or just watch it online, there's great information coming out about what's happening with Yammer and plugging into both Teams and SharePoint. So just innovation happening at the speed of the internet, and which reflects the needs, the changes that are going on within your organization. And part of the problem with SharePoint always was that, hey, it's not moving fast enough. It's every 3 to 4 years we're getting a major version, and that's part of that crossing that, past the suck threshold into the passion threshold, was being able to deliver what your end users needed. So much of SharePoint's history, back with the Windows SharePoint services, the WSS days and Foundation, was that it was so easy for teams for individuals, like a marketing team in your organization, to bypass IT who's not delivering what they need and go and deploy, just set up on a server somewhere within the intranet, establish SharePoint and then go and build it out and be functional with it, and then take it back to IT and say, you must now support this. And when you have organizations that are constantly shifting, changing, reorgs that are just at a constant pace, when you have changes that happen, you need the flexibility to be able to go in and rewire that intranet. And look, a few years back, I owned all these SharePoint environments, a number of different organizations. I was in a shared services team in about an 1,800 person organization, and my team owned all of the SharePoint environments. And so we were constantly going through, and somebody said, hey, you know what? We rolled up, we moved this team over. We need you to move all of the assets over. And things were constantly shifting. What happened is we would, instead of going and trying to do like a formal migration and move, and we basically just abandoned, team sites within that, moved what was necessary. And then we had all these kind of ghost sites and tons of content that was out there, floating out there, which caused confusion. We tried to clean it up with navigation, but you have different needs. Some teams need to have something very light, ad hoc. They're going in there. It's, using OneDrive and Teams, where they're storing some content within SharePoint, but most of the day-to-day is not in SharePoint. Others need to have a very intranet-based, structured, they've got process, they've got workflow, they have applications that they've developed that are all necessary for those environments. So there's this mix. But then on top of all of that, then you have people that said, well, I need to see what's happening across all of these teams. I need a roll up. How can you share this news? And I'm telling you, I have that personal experience of going in. I had somebody who spent, I'd say, half her job was going through pulling down status reports, which sounds like my old project management days, running PMOs, doing just nothing but status reports. But pulling in this information and providing it in roll-ups on another site or a top-level site or an email and pushing that information out, that just doesn't work. Things move too quickly, and I'll tell you, it's depressing to have that role. To no offense to anybody out there who might love that. You might need to get a mental health checkup, but if you like that kind of stuff, but the more that you can automate those activities, and that's where hub sites come into play. And that's why you need to have real-time dynamic data. You need to have dashboards versus static reports. Being able to go and flexibly move, leveraging communication sites where most of the information just needs to be published and read by your audience versus interacted with. I mean, there's so many different options now that you have for how you collaborate within your organizations. But some of the things and considerations for the modern intranet, I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. If you do have questions at any point, please do use the chat function, and we'll try to address those as we go through. But some of the considerations. So you have your news, announcements, information. So it's really that broadcast messaging. You have the ability to go in and search and discover new things, find what you're looking for. There's the collaboration, working together, the communication, the sharing of information. There's the personal view, your team, your division across the company. Each of those you have in another presentation. I go through and give some examples of this activity. The fact that you collaborate at different levels. It doesn't make sense to use the exact same tools or methods of collaboration and communication at each of these levels. If we're talking one-on-one, it's going to be different than the 10 of us on our team, which will be different than the 100 of us in our division, who are different than the 10,000 people within our company. And I think that we inherently understand that, and yet IT teams, I'll beat up on them a little bit, or the executive that makes the decision says, we will use this technology across all of those things, and ignore the different unique needs of each of those constituencies. We need that usability, the user experience. It needs to be reliable. It also needs to be recognizable. The theming, the branding, how it looks is so critical to the success of those personal, team, division, and cross-company communities that you're a member of. You need to be able to shuffle, reorg, grow, contract, depending on what the collaboration is. You need to see continuous innovation and have a strong change management process. One of my favorite quotes, I've been using this for almost 30 years, is the more you involve people in the process, the more likely people will support the process. Maybe it's not been 30 years, it's about 20 years. I came up with that when I was doing my MBA in the late 90s, and have used that throughout my blogging career. People, if it feels stagnant, if they're not getting the features they want, back to that suck threshold, then they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to go rogue. That's where the shadow IT happens. You need mobility, flexibility. So it's mobile device support, browser support, the bring your own device support, all those kinds of things. People need to stay plugged in through, it's not, very few organizations, if you work in government or you work in very restricted industries where you're at a terminal where that's the only place you can view through that controlled system. The reality is we need to have much more flexibility. So we might have intranet and extranet solutions. We're working with customers and with partners, and it needs to be able to move some content, some information, be able to share between those environments. We need control over who can access, create, and consume. And we need to make sure that we're not breaking any laws. We need to be secure. We need to be compliant. Then, of course, there's other ways of accessing that content. And then there's everything else that's involved, the apps and services integration, because it doesn't matter how up to date you are. The internet moves at a faster speed than anything an ISV, even Microsoft, can do. And sometimes there are valid reasons to go look at a third-party application out on the web and integrate that in. It may not be completely compliant or secure, but you may make a decision as an organization to say, hey, this is necessary for us to have that competitive advantage and go and accomplish what we need to accomplish. We're going to support that. And there's some great ways of doing that, and Teams actually provides a great way to do that. And I'll talk about that. Then you have that, the out of the box that I want to customize and configure, and it really depends. That's that build or buy. You need options for both of those things. On the SharePoint side, of course, you've got the classic, the team sites. So by department, your team, the project, maybe your intranet versus extranet for partners and customers, or I always like the V teams or committees. Team sites are perfect for that. Whereas communication sites might be around, hey, it's an initiative. It's something that we want to broadly communicate, like a campaign or around an event that's going to happen, it's going to end, but people want to increase their visibility of what's happening and share across those things. So I think that hopefully that makes sense to everybody about, well, which do I use, a team site or a communication site, which is just another template there. And so there's a lot of things that are common between that. I mean, it's still, again, communication site is just a template of a team site, but it's set up for these specific purposes. Just like a lot of organizations would go in and customize, site templates so that it was uniform. I worked with a client that was, health and makeup and skin products. And they wanted every team site to look exactly the same web parts, the same capabilities, the same lists and libraries throughout, so that no matter who was entering that product, and they had hundreds of products, that you would find in the exact same place the list of all the meeting notes, a list of all the decisions that are made, the leadership over that product, all of the ingredients, what's happening with manufacturing and distribution and all that data. So there's a roll-up per product, there's a roll-up per division of product, and it was very structured. And so here's a client I'm sure would have loved to have had the communication sites and the hub site capability, as well as their very structured team site model. Of course, then hub sites then draws from both of those, gives you that centralized navigation, that theme and logo, the search scope. And what's beautiful about how hub sites work is if you then reorg and suddenly you've got maybe 5 team sites and 3 communication sites, and maybe one part of your organization is shifting over to another business unit, so you reduce down to maybe you lose 2 of your team sites, add a 4th, but you add 3 additional communication sites, and all of that, moving these and assigning them to that hub site automatically then pulls in those team sites and communication sites, gives them that unified navigation, the theme and logo, the search scope, and then enables you to share out the news and activity roll up and push notifications of that content. All of that is automatic. It is just a fantastic capability that really just takes your SharePoint environment to the next level. And it's why we're seeing this huge, I'd say, SharePoint never decreased in its usage or even its growth, but it's just on a different trajectory and back to strong growth model. Of course, communication sites, again, some more just kind of marketing around this. It's about creating, reaching, engaging, and informing your audiences. So if you've not seen it, if you've not played around with these, I highly recommend that you go and take a look. And there's a lot of this. I'm not going to get into like what's coming in SharePoint 2019, and there are a lot of features that, especially from a developer standpoint, that are kind of catching up for the on-premises version of SharePoint with a lot of these different capabilities. Because so much of my world, I'm just focused on SharePoint Online, Office 365, Microsoft 365 now. But there's definitely great content that's out there. Go and take a look at the Microsoft Office blog. Specifically, go search for content by Bill Baer, who is on the product marketing team, and it's great about he does such a great job of outlining those differences between on-prem and what is out in the cloud. But so you have this very clean design. And again, you can go in, change the themes, the logo, all of that around this so that you have this unified look. But then you can also go in there and curate the content, the news that your visitors see around the sites. And you of course go in there. It's all the critical activities, the events, the documents, other resources that you want to assign, who to contact within that. So basically, Microsoft has learned these are consistently the aspects of your SharePoint sites that are leveraged for this type of communication site template. So they've provided this out-of-the-box experience that is personalized, that is customizable still, but is just the most relevant to users that are coming and entering these communication sites. Then of course the hub site, and all of this, by the way, has a great mobile experience out of the box. It's fantastic the way that they've gone and built this. But you can go and build those hub sites to pull from those multiple team sites and communication sites based on your needs. So it's just really powerful how it allows you to go and do that. And of course, then you can create something that's at that top level, a blog at the hub level that then draws from content from each of those different areas. And again, you can curate that and then set up push notifications around that. So you have a lot of options for collaborating with folks. Of course, the team site, all of the abilities that you're accustomed to, being able to go in there and design that experience to fit the needs of that specific team. It doesn't matter. You can have very different looking, functioning team sites within your overall SharePoint environment, but that hub site roll-up still then goes in and unifies all of those things for that broader community or constituency. All right, so here is, I'll kind of wrap up on this and start jumping into the merging of the two, of SharePoint and Teams, and then talk about Teams to kind of end. But talking about your intranet, and I think it is critical to go through. I kind of outlined that list of all of those pieces, and so this somewhat kind of summarizes some of those things, but in a slightly different way. But again, this is information that's coming from Microsoft of, look, we've done this for a long time. SharePoint has been kind of #1 in its category for for almost 2 decades now. But here's what it takes to make your intranet successful. #1 is having solid governance in place. And I know it's the G word. Everybody says, they roll their eyes like, yeah, what is this? It's this empty platitude. What does it actually mean? Well, it means that you've clearly defined the roles around the platform. You know who the owners are, the drivers are. I'm a marketing guy, so I usually refer to this as the personas. You know who your end users are. You know who your collaboration managers are at the team level, your admins or IT pros, and then your executives. Maybe that's simple, 4 different levels. Each has a different role. Each has a different decisions to be made at that level. You know who owns what, where to go with questions, where to go with approval. That is so critical to the success of your intranet. Otherwise, you run into that blockage problem with IT, and sometimes it's not their fault at all. They're waiting for approvals, they're waiting for clarifications, or they're being hamstrung by rules that were established prior to all this technology that dictates that they can't go and give you, the end user, what you need. So having that governance so that you have a proactive, regular meeting of various stakeholders to discuss, here are these requests, here's what we think the risk is, the level of integration and change, the security and compliance factors around that, and then make a decision. Hey, yes, we can move forward, or no, we can't, and here's why. Again, the more you involve people in the process, the more likely they will support that process, because when your process is transparent And you have to tell your end users no when it's transparent and you explain, look, it's breaking every compliance rule, will be sued, will be subject to fines. They're usually understanding about not getting their little online social features added in. And so have that discussion. Hey, can we give you 80% with what SharePoint or Microsoft provides? Or, hey, let's go and add this third-party tool, knowing it's not compliant, but let's have a manual process to kind of govern that. So governance is critical. Of course, having a strategy. Where does it fit? How does it align? What are we doing with our intranet? This is, again, looking at a regular basis at whether the platform's actually being used is a pretty important part of the strategy, because if people are not using it, if you see dips in engagement and in collaboration on the environment, you see a decrease in the amount of content being added to SharePoint, which I'm telling you right now is out of the norm in the industry, because what we've seen is that the volume, the increase in volume of content within SharePoint has been astronomical. It is still hockey sticking, going up. I can't emphasize that enough. You need to have a support model. You need to understand, especially the options from Office 365, understand how support works, and then also from your key vendors, these other solutions that you have integrated in. It is important to have a great team that is energetic, that's out there communicating, disseminating information. I'm a big fan of the proactive training and having your IT teams do this. Offer online as well as in person, regularly go out and polling, as well as asking for feedback, having town hall type events where you're going through and talking about what's new. Look at what Microsoft has been doing over the last few years. They've been doing all of those things. I mean, they've brought back with the North American SharePoint conference, which was a third-party event, and you have ESPC, you've got other regional events, and of course all the SharePoint Saturdays and all these. But Microsoft is supporting all of those. They've got Microsoft Tech Community on the website. They're regularly doing podcasts and videos and all these things that give you rich use cases and examples of how to use this capability. This is so not your SharePoint team of 10 years ago. It's just amazing the volume and the quality of the content being produced. So yeah, there's just great stuff that's out there. Have a great team. Funding. Don't underestimate the need for a strong budget around your intranet. It is your core operating system for your business. And if you're not leveraging, if it's not your core system, then you're doing it wrong, because it is. This is where people chat. This is where people communicate. This is where they collaborate. This is where they share. And this is where your intellectual property is stored. Change management, of course, you need to move fast. You need to move quickly, be decisive. Your change management board, just like your governance board, it might be the same people. It's most likely a little bit different because it's more skews on the technical side, but should have stakeholders who have the ability to make decisions on behalf of their organizations. That you're not sitting there, you're this team that has to then go and get permission to move forward. That is not change management. Education. So as I said, plan for it, ongoing, proactive, community-based. I'm a big fan of technical evangelism. I was in that role for a number of ISVs for years, and I believe in it. But on top of all this, you need to be flexible and recognize that, as I said earlier, no matter how beautiful your environment is, it's not going to meet the needs of your end users forever. You need to recognize that your end users are not trying to go around you unless you are obtuse and not listening, and then they are going around you. But that no single solution is going to meet the needs of everyone, and so you need to recognize that sometimes what your end users need is just not possible through SharePoint, and to recognize that and have conversations with your end users about that. Again, transparency is key, flexibility in moving forward and giving your end users what they need, but in a secure, managed, governed way. Still provide that flexibility. So how does the SharePoint intranet model fit everyday collaboration scenarios? And I don't need to belabor this point anymore, but I think that just the complexity of how our world is today, all of the people, the teams, the projects, the V teams, the vendors, the partners, the customers that we work with, and all the various tools that we use, you need to be able to support all of those things. When you dictate, hey, you can only use these 3 tools, then you limit their collaboration, you limit people's ability to do their jobs. And so different tools, different platforms are sometimes the right answer, but done the right way. So I think Microsoft came out with about a year and a half ago with some messaging around inner loops and outer loops, which I thought was just a fantastic step forward. And I've expanded on it a little bit here about where to start a conversation. So looking at some of the differences here. So we've come now from that traditional intranet SharePoint, I always refer to it as this more structured collaboration standpoint. And then you have other options. So here's the way that Microsoft describes it. So they talk about the inner loop, which is where it is, and I'll define it this way. I'll press forward here. Maybe you have an event team. So you have an event that's happening on October 10th. You're working together to pull that together. It's kind of a virtual team across multiple groups in your organization. So it's not something where everyone needs to have access. There will be a live external site that everyone will see, but you need to be able to collaborate very closely around this. Or maybe it's your support team. Look, I've managed operations teams and where you have tier 1, tier 2 support. So tier 1 working with clients, tier 2 that's actually support for your tier 1 support team, and tier 3 would be like the product team. And so maybe you have a conversation that's happening with a ticket that's opened, and you need to get 5 people together, and over the next 3 days you're working very closely. You pull in product, you pull in management to try and resolve this ticket. So it's a conversation based, but it's contextual. You need to be able to pull in other resources, other assets, to have links to the customer site, to have screenshots of the error messages, of the problems that they're having, and all of that, but within this small team of 5, 6, 7 people to resolve it. Once it's closed, it's done. You're done with that. You can archive that conversation. You don't want to lose it for historical purposes, but it's that collaboration is over. So it doesn't make sense to go spin up a team site. And so what a lot of people would do is maybe go and open up within a document within OneDrive, or do something in Yammer, and kind of there's all these different options. But Teams is actually the best place to go and have that. And I know Microsoft doesn't use this phrase, but the high velocity conversations, I think it's a bit corny, a bit marketing-esque, but I think it still fits. It's that high velocity, we need to work very closely together. It might be that project manager who's put together a V team to collaborate over the lifetime of a specific initiative. Again, this isn't the public site, everybody's on that. That might be out in Yammer, it might be in SharePoint. So it's this inner loop, this close working team, the day-to-day conversation based, very intense. That's what Teams is, that core of that inner loop. Now, if you think of then the outer loop, which is more of that Yammer story. And so maybe you have like an ideation opportunity. So you want to ask the entire company, hey, we're looking for ideas around this. We're going to name this new product, or we're putting together our annual company picnic, and we're looking for input and help in what we're going to do around this. I used Yammer. One of my favorite scenarios was part of an acquisition. A new company had a company-wide, multiple offices around the world meeting, and they had speakers. They were doing a live broadcast. just a web broadcast, and people were emailing some questions, and I'm like, why are we not establishing a Yammer group for this, what was an annual meeting? And so I established in the Yammer group, I started asking this, I pushed everybody out, and by the end of the first speaker, our CEO, we had this Yammer group up and running where people were posting questions in different categories with the hashtag around this internal event. Well, about 6 to 8 months later, we did another acquisition, another small ISV, and did another town hall. Same thing happened. And I went in and started using, and others, I actually got prompted by others, the same hashtag in Yammer, asking questions again, and actually pulling up questions that were answered 6, 8 months earlier from the other town hall with the other acquisition, and resharing that conversation, surfacing that information. So we had these information assets that were brought across this organization that was providing this, like a wiki, or like just a larger collection of Q&A for the organization. It worked fantastic for that model. Or when you're looking for expertise outside of your working team, maybe even partners. I think I have that. It could be, and it's kind of, these blend together. But I still use Yammer as a quick and dirty extranet solution for vTeam. So I do research, and I've got a number of projects that are out there, and I sometimes use, depending on the project, the research project, and I'll pull in various MVPs and sponsors and just community influencers and experts via Yammer, and that will be just a central place where we can go and have internal and external people go and collaborate on these broader themes. Now, look, there's overlap with all of this. You can have internal and external communications in Teams. You can do that within SharePoint and OneDrive. You can do that in Yammer. And I think that is like the difference here. Then you have what we call I refer to it as the ubiquitous loop, because it's consistent across all these things. Sometimes the right way to communicate and collaborate is via email. Folks, email is not going away. Not in my lifetime. And I expect to live another 50 years, I hope. There's nothing serious that runs in my health issues in my family, so I think it's possible. But 40, let's say 40 to be safe. But in that time, I don't see email going away. But what you have is, that tool, and then SharePoint and OneDrive, which are integrated into both of those things. If I'm uploading a document in Teams, or soon within Yammer, it's SharePoint on the back end. I've got the ability to go and pull from or push to SharePoint or OneDrive depending on the need. And this could be OneDrive for business, which is SharePoint behind it, or OneDrive the personal. As well as through all these things, you can also connect other file storage like Box and Dropbox and Google and iCloud and kind of all those things. You have different options. But the point here about where to start the conversation is that what ties all this together are groups, the graph, and then common security. That's where we're going here. And that's what I meant when I said early on, is that it doesn't matter where you're collaborating on the front end, because on the back end, it's not all 100% there yet, but it's on an accelerated timescale, will all be accessible on the back end. So what I mean by this, so you've got, whether you're authoring content, creating things, you're doing mail and social, you've got sites and content and other things that are out there, you're conversation based, you've got your data, all of that is tied together by the Office 365 groups. And think of this as that key in the database, is that there's nothing that you can do. Like, you can't go work in a vacuum. Well, I mean, you can, and no one's there with you. If you're using personal OneDrive and sharing files, yes. But within your organization, everything that you're doing is part of a community, a part of a project, part of a team. And the key that ties those things together is an Office 365 group. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of groups and group management and all that side of that. I'm just trying to explain, the construct around which Office 365 and Zoom, Microsoft 365 are being architected, where group is the keystone holding these pieces together, so that whether you are having a conversation in Yammer, having a conversation in Teams, having a conversation in Skype, which is going away and being replaced by Teams, but or within email, if it's tied to that group, if I'm able to then go into and search within that context, that key, that of that Office 365 group, I should be able to then find every single conversation, every document, every asset, every artifact created as part of that group. That's where we're going. What makes that possible is that everything will write to the graph. The graph underlies everything. And then of course you have the analytics, the Power BI and other tools, other capability that's being integrated into every single product. So you have the cognitive services that are being able to leverage this content. Think how powerful Office 365 becomes as a platform when every product that's integrated into it is tied together by groups and accessible through the graph, so that you can then go and look at analytics, you can look at data around that, and then set security and compliance policies and procedures that can be enforced, because it understands, okay, hey, look, there's a policy that was set around this group. Here's how that policy is translated across whatever that input on the front end. That's where we're going. That's the future of what we're doing with Office 365 and Microsoft 365. And Microsoft 365, of course, if you're not familiar with that, it is tying together. It's Office 365 is part of that. It's mobility, it's security, and other tools that are on top of that. So it's just and Windows as well is a core part of that. I shouldn't have left that one out. But that's Microsoft 365. I do want to illustrate here because it is such a key point, the groups building blocks. You've probably seen this again and again, but just to further kind of make this point is that what a group is not a competing tool to Outlook or OneDrive or Yammer or SharePoint. It's not an either or. It's a construct. It's a distribution group. It's a security group at the Azure level. And so what is powerful about a group is that, hey, like today, there's some nuances. If you create a group, from creating when you create a new Yammer group, it creates an Office 365 group. If you create a new SharePoint team site, it creates an Office 365 group. You can go and create an Office 365 group and then select which components that you add into that. There is, if you've not seen it, Matt Wade created a fantastic infographic that shows exactly what is added depending on where you create a group. But where Microsoft is going, and my understanding is that no matter where you create the group, you'll have all of these, the ability to add all of these different products or workloads, and it'll make it much more of a unified experience. You'll still be able to turn some things off and kind of configure based on your need. But what's powerful, why I share this, why this is important, is that Microsoft for a long time has had a difficult time with new product introduction. So they release a new product like Microsoft Teams, and I was excited, at the same time troubled. Like, wait a second, there's overlap with everything else that we already have. How does this make sense? And so now I have a better understanding of where Teams fits and when to use which tool based on my needs. But what the group does is it provides this construct so that Microsoft can now release a new product, plug it into the group, and you as a group, as an admin, can say, all right, I now have a new tool and I have certain admin controls, permissions. I know where it fits, how it complies with our standards, with our policies. and I can deploy it much more quickly. And it also gives a better guidance to Microsoft other product teams that are innovating, coming up with new ideas of what to provide of, hey, it's going to plug into a group. We need to know how it's archived, how it's managed, how it works with the other products within the context of that group. So all things to think about. And of course, groups are at the top level, the owners, the members, the policies, and then team sites plug into that. Now, to introduce on the team side of things, and it's part of this is you hear a lot of this, hey, it's about creating that intelligent system, the intelligent applications. And when Microsoft talks about that, you've got Graph, you've got all of the same capabilities that you have in an intranet: search, discovery, notifications, automation, all the customizations, all of the configuration capabilities, and then this outcome-based. Here's what we're actually trying to accomplish. And Teams is an excellent representation of those things. So now you're adding Teams into the mix. So what are intelligent communications? It's all these things. It's cognitive services, the machine learning, the graph. It could be Internet of Things. All of these new terms that you want to be able to leverage depending on the needs of your organization. You might look at all this stuff and say, hey, look, we're still just a SharePoint shop, but we need something that's more of that, that inner loop communication. We're not looking to do all of this other stuff yet, but hey, it's possible to do this stuff later, and it's great to know that by moving across and adopting this and leveraging this capability that you're set up to start adding capability later. Because again, you don't want to be caught if your IT organization not providing the features that your end users need to be productive. So I'll skip past some of the text here and kind of jump into the meat of this. But when you have like the Skype for Business folding into Microsoft Teams, but Teams, what makes it different is that it weaves the various workloads in together. Again, it's all contextual, and then allows you, it really surfaces the future, the possibility of the Microsoft Graph better than any of the other workloads within Office 365. All right, let's take a look at some of this, what's possible here. So again, some more marketing speak. You've probably seen a lot of this stuff from Microsoft, everything that it can do. You'll see words, phrases like, business transformation with Teams, which is all great. I love, and I've changed this around a little bit, but Microsoft illustrated this with the future of business meetings, because here's a great example of how this works and how Teams is integrated within this. But this is what kind of the intelligent communications look like in the future. So you're getting ready to go into a meeting. So before the meeting, so you've got the Outlook invite, you have access to the team, to the SharePoint environment, but the system then generates automatically based on who's attending and your role, maybe share some insights, maybe prompts you with reminders and gives you context to what you're going into. During the meeting, you might do a meeting there through Teams, whether you're in person or dialing into that, and it captures that, it records that, it allows you to share that information. You get the text conversation as well as the video, as well as right there through the Teams experience. You're able to go in and there and navigate and see all of the relevant team sites, SharePoint team sites, Yammer groups, external websites and third-party tools via tabs within Teams. You're able to get all of that in context to that project there within Teams. And then following this experience, you have the notes and actions are captured. I mean, leveraging Stream, it goes in and actually does the transcription. It can translate the transcription. It immediately with transcription makes the content searchable, and it's saving all of that content within SharePoint. So then, because it's all part of that Office 365 group you're leveraging in Teams, you can immediately start pulling from, searching based on the conversation that was in that meeting. Really powerful stuff. That's where we're going. Automating that team experience. So you're not leaving the team wondering, hey, I didn't take good enough notes. What was I asked to do again? It's going to pull those things out, and even integrations with project management software like Planner to be able to automatically assign things and send out reminders. Hey, here are your calls to action out of that meeting. Again, I'm going to go by some of this pretty quick. You'll have it in the slides to go look in more detail, but you've got that built-in intelligence within Teams, everything that I just talked about, your transcription, translation, speech recognition, just a lot of great capability there. Of course, you have that, the chat. You've got, you're part of the communities that are relevant to you. You can highlight, remove yourself from discussions that are no longer relevant, but the history is still there. You can still go discover, find those things. And it really does embody, Teams embodies Microsoft's vision for where they're going with intelligent communications and intelligent collaboration. There's a great quote. So Caruana Gatimu, who's part of the Teams, principal PM with Teams Engineering, longtime friend. Caruana and I launched back in 2010 the SharePoint Saturday Los Angeles together. So she was just a strong, she was a co-founder of the Los Angeles SharePoint user group. So she's been in the space for many, many years. But she pointed out that, I don't properly attribute her here, but she's the one who said that successful adoption of Microsoft Teams requires a change in behavior. It is a very different way than was just the pure SharePoint. It's not just a product, it's a different way of working. And that's why Microsoft has done so much to try and communicate like the inner loop versus outer loop. And it can mean rewiring your corporate culture. And I'll jump past this, again, marketing stuff here. I'm going to jump into some of the examples. It's a hub for teamwork. It's customizable. It's secure. Important questions people often ask around, like, well, how do I go in and back up? I mean, is it secure? What happens with my conversations? What happens with my files? Teams was built leveraging both the Exchange workload and the SharePoint workload. Your email, the one-on-one chats, the group chats, any channel messages that happen are all saved within, archived that are discoverable through the Exchange workload. Any attachment, SharePoint files, OneNote, OneDrive for Business, all of that are stored within SharePoint, which again has e-discovery, legal hold, compliance, all of those capabilities. So day one, Teams had security and compliance. So all that's there. So how do we leverage the two things together? How do we bridge the gap? We've been a 20-year, 15-year SharePoint organization. We're now starting to use Teams. How do they work together? Well, the first one is by adding tabs. You can go in there and add, let's say you're working on a project, and maybe you have 3 different SharePoint team sites that are relevant to your project. You can add tabs that go right to those team sites. It can go to a specific list or library, and you now have the complete, that list or library functionality. It's not just like an iframe. It is that list or library within that Teams tab. And so you have the ability to go in, add any third-party tool, YouTube video, PowerPoint slides, embed that right into via the tab, so that that team, that high velocity team, that team that's working on that trouble ticket can go in there, have all of the relevant contextual data right there at their fingertips. They don't need to go and wade through multiple environments to find what's relevant. You can save the open ticket within your ticketing system in a tab. And so the people who have access to that conversation would get right to what they need. You can add connectors, which what that does is it actually pulls information from that other tool, that other system, that other site, and does automatic notifications within the conversation. So you can go in there and say, hey, look, here you can develop your own, or there's out-of-the-box connectors that are there, so that it's publishing or pushing rich content into that conversation. So what's great about that is that you can then interact with that. You can use that as, it can go in and say, hey, Christian, you just got a new task assigned to you within Trello. and then I can click on that within the conversation. It can then take me right over to that Trello page, or I can go into the tab where we have our team Trello open and go in and modify those open tasks. You can go in and create bots. So this is where you can leverage all of the rich data being captured within the graph and go and automate so that you can have that back and forth, that two-way conversation. So you can actually right there in the conversation thread in Teams, you can say, hey, go do this, and it will go and create a new task within Trello or in Planner. It will go and mark off as completed or comment on on a conversation that's happening in another team or in a SharePoint site. I mean, it's just really incredible the level of automation that you can do to streamline how you get information, get input, engagement from end users. So depending on what it is, like I love the example here of like, hey, when's the best time for us to meet? Well, don't let them force them to go click to open another app or tab, even to go to another screen to figure out a calendar date that works with them. Say, hey, here's when I'm available, and select the one that works best for you, and then automatically adds it to your calendar. So you'll be able to automate a lot of the different things. Now, of course, as I said, SharePoint is behind the scenes inside of Teams. It's not an either or. When you upload a document to Teams, it is SharePoint. When SharePoint, when you create a new Microsoft team, it creates a new SharePoint team site to share all those things. And now there has been talk about groupify of those things where you have the ability. Microsoft has been working hard to make it possible for you to point to an existing team site and to use that for your storage. But you've got different ways of doing that even today. Of course, it also has Exchange inside. So it's a required component of Teams. It's not an either or. Groups is part of it. It's out of the box. It's there. Your shared memberships and roles. So the ability to go, and you've got the owners, the team members, the various guests, which have limited capabilities. So you can add external people into a team. They have limited capability. You are also warned when there is somebody who is outside your organization within that team. So you can be sensitive to that. Of course, the guest access, that's there, and so you don't need to go and create an entire profile and give them licenses for that, but it is a way to recognize, hey, these are external folks that have access to this environment. So does Teams replace your need for SharePoint? No, it does not. But there are multiple ways that you can leverage your existing SharePoint infrastructure within Teams. I mentioned this. First off, you can add it as a tab. So up at the top of the navigation of your Teams environment, you can go in and add a new tab. Of course, I've got the wrong images here. There you go. So you can add this. You add the plus mark, go in and add your SharePoint site, name the library, search for that, provide the SharePoint link directly to that page. It'll identify it. You click next. It then adds it, the document, the list or library to that, save it, and there it is within your Teams experience, your Teams window as a tab, everything to do with that. And you can have multiple SharePoint sites across those tabs. And you can name them smaller names so it takes up less real estate up top. But that's one way you can do that. And so it's very powerful. It's a great article here by Jason Himmelstein, fellow MVP, where he goes in and shares some of the capabilities, the additional capabilities there. You can also go through, because by default there is files. So when you create a new Microsoft Teams team with the channels, it creates a SharePoint team site, and that is accessed through the files. Well, you can go connect to an existing SharePoint team site library within files. So you've got the tabs across the top, and then you click on files, and it basically allows you to go in and add to that navigation, that drop down there. So if you want to access or provide through that navigation, it's much the same. You go in there and say, hey, point to this list, this library, add it to the folder, and now you've added there at the top there, that online marketing documents, under that files. So maybe you have, it's just part of the way that you've created your team's environment. You've got third-party applications of the capabilities across the tabs, across the top navigation, and then you want to have all of the structure, the SharePoint sites accessible within files, under the files and through those folders. So it makes it very easy, again, depending on your needs for that community, for that virtual team, to make it easy to access the important SharePoint sites. Of course, there's other automation that you can do. So you can connect the teams to SharePoint with Flow. So you can go in there, and again, there's a great article that's out there that says, hey, creating these custom actions, accessing SharePoint via Teams. It's all about automation. And Microsoft is getting more and more creative. They're adding more things out of the box to make it easier for you to access the other workloads inside of Teams. What are the best practices for using SharePoint with Teams? Look, their best practice for me may not be a best practice for you, but Microsoft does provide a lot of great content. It's a little bit blurry, but there's a link at the bottom there of use cases, of customer stories. Fast Track has some great information. There's a number of sites that are out there within Microsoft, out on docs.microsoft.com that help you to understand, hey, here are some examples. Go spend some time looking through those examples and find something that might be closer to what your organization needs. Of course, there's guidance out around how to implement it. You'll find all of that out on successwithteams.com. The Teams organization, the product team, is constantly adding to this site. So there's great videos. Caruana has a vlog series and a podcast that she's constantly adding to. So great resources that are out there. I know this is a lot of information. I went over by a few minutes. If you've got questions, happy to answer them now or reach out to me directly. Always happy to discuss and hear more from you. So, I mean, with that, I'll turn it back over. And thanks for attending today. But please don't be a stranger. Reach out if you got questions, if you have other examples. And I'd love to blog about that and share out and cite the great work that the community has done. So happy to do that.
Thanks, Christian. That was a great presentation. As we are over time, we will skip the Q&A if that's okay with you.
That's all right. We can follow up again. You can ask questions, just reach out, and I will go back to that slide, and I'll definitely respond and answer the questions directly as well as in a blog post.
Super. Christian, thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated on behalf of the community.
Thanks a lot.
Super. Okay, everybody. That is all for today. See sharepointeurope.com/register-for-webinars for further details on all upcoming webinars. Or if you wish, you can visit our resource center at sharepointeurope.com/resource-center for all previous webinars. That is it for today. Thank you to Christian Buckley for a fantastic webinar. We will talk to you soon. Thank you and goodbye.